Utah is on the bubble, and on today's show, we have a member of the NCAA Division I Men's Basketball Selection Committee who will be deciding their fate to talk all things Utah basketball on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department, and I have a very special guest on today's show as Tom Wistrcill, of course, my dad, and member of the NCAA Division I Selection Committee for the men's basketball portion is joining us today. Tom, thank you so much for coming on for us. I guess I'm probably just going to call you Dad since that sounded weird. But Dad, I appreciate you coming on to talk about this. And I want to dive into it right away and just want to talk about your thoughts on this Utah team because they are firmly on the bubble.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, JT. They are firmly on the bubble and in a good place. I like this Utah team. I've watched them in person a couple times. It's an advantage to living here in Salt Lake City that I can go over and watch them. I've watched them on TV a number of times, and they've built a good resume. And I think the thing that is hard for fans to remember is every game matters, including that first win over Eastern Washington from the Big Sky Conference, right? So while you ride the waves of ups and downs, and we played great this game and we didn't play good that game, and all that. When it comes down to it, we're going to take a look at the entire season. It's who did you play, where did you play them, and how did you do? And that's what I like about this Utah team. As I look through their resume, they that 4-7 in quad one, those 4 wins are really good wins, and that's going to be meaningful because what we're looking for is we want to see how our team's going to do against other tournament teams. And that's what Utah's done a good job at. I mean, as I scan through there, right? I mean, Eastern Washington is leading the Big Sky right now, right? Wake Forest is a bubble team. They beat them. They beat St. Mary's. They beat BYU. They beat Washington State. And that's just all before December 29th. So those wins carry a long ways to Selection Sunday. Now, it's not the end all because you still need to not have bad losses. And you need to end the season on a high note. But when I look at that Utah team, that's what I look at is let's take a look at the entire season, and then they'll be judged against their opponents that we're looking at in the room of those last teams on the bubble. Those teams will be judged on their resumes as well.
You mentioned the resume, the teams that are in a similar position to them, all very important. But one thing that is very clear when you read comments on social media and just all kinds of things whenever the field of 68 is finally revealed is, there is so much just confusion about what actually makes the best 68, the criteria you guys look into. So could you explain to fans a little bit more, particularly for our Utah fans today, what all goes into this process about how you guys make your decisions on who gets into all the madness in March?
Yeah, there are 5 metrics we use. So certainly, the net being the most important one. But Ken Palm is a part of it. We use strength of record. We use the Kevin Paga Index KPI. So, again, there are metrics because we need to be able to use some numbers to get some teams in some sort of order. But from there, it's us watching games. It's judging you based upon how you did it, like I said, against tournament teams. It's also based upon did we think you challenged yourself? That's something that Utah did a really good job of. They not only have the 15th highest net strength of schedule, but for our purposes, for me personally, they challenge themselves out of conference. To have the 26th strongest out of conference schedule, that's meaningful, right? So if there's a lot of metrics that are similar against a team, but that team played a 220 non-conference strength of schedule, somebody like me is going to give the edge to somebody that played the 26. Now, I'm just one of 12 people in the room, and that means that 12 people can vote and look at through their own lens and judge these metrics and the eye test and look at different games and who was injured and missed this game and that game. They can look at them differently. But for me, I'm really interested in out-of-conference strength of schedule, and then I'm really interested in how you did in road and neutral games. So because nobody plays home games in the NCAA tournament. So, for example, when I look at Utah's road and neutral, I've got them at 4 and 9 combined, road and neutral, right? So that's not great, but that's the reason they're on the bubble. If they were 9 and 4 on the road, they wouldn't be on the bubble. They'd already be probably firmly in the field. So that's part of the reason is they're on the bubble. They've had some losses, both home and road, which aren't great losses. But nonetheless, at least from their perspective, they have no quad 4 losses. That's good. So there's no horrible losses. There's only one quad 3 loss. So that helps them. But in the room, like I said, I'm just one of 12 people that's going to cast a vote based upon the criteria that I think is most important.
Yeah, it's a big discussion, a wide group of personalities and people who come all across the country as well, come together to make these decisions over a few days. And the nice thing for Utah is, yes, they're on the bubble, but they have an opportunity to add to their resume too. They got one regular season game remaining. It was great to see them take care of business.
No, they have 3. They have 3. The men have 3 games.
Oh, yes, they do. You're right. I got my fingers crossed with the wires crossed with the women's team for a second. Right? The men have a lot more opportunities left because they still have to take on, when you're talking about their schedule. We talked about Stanford, still got the game against Cal, of course, and that's the final home game for Utah, but then traveling to Oregon State and then at Oregon. What do you think is most important for Utah as they look to close out their regular season?
Yeah, you'd love to go 3-0, obviously, right? I mean, that's why, they blew out Stanford tonight, that game. Not unexpected. The Utes have a lot to play for. Stanford doesn't. Cal's a dangerous team. They've got enough talent where they can put points on the board and they can cause some problems. But that's a must win for Utah. You have to defend the home court, And then, you go to Oregon State and Oregon. At Oregon State's a quad 3 game. At Oregon's a quad 1 game. If they can sweep, obviously that puts them above the bubble at the moment, I think. But if they stumble one game, I don't think they're out of it. It just hurts them if they lose the Cal game. It doesn't hurt them as much. You lose the Oregon game. That's a quad 1 win against a team that's really good, right? Oregon 63 in the net. So again, I think 2-1 keeps them in a similar position, keeps them solidly on the bubble. You look at Lenardi, he has them, I think, in his first 4 out tonight. Jerry Palm has them in their first 4 in. So what does that tell you from those 2 experts? They're on the bubble, right? So I just think that's really important leading into the Pac-12 tournament, where when they get to the Pac-12 tournament, then it's all about matchups. Who are you going to play that first time you have to step on the court? Is it an easy game that you're expected to win, or is it a tough game that's going to be hard to win that adds to your resume that then sets you up for maybe some further success down the road? So with bubble teams, that margin is so narrow that every game counts.
Every game counts, and you know what games also will, of course, count? The ones once we get to the Pac-12 tournament. Want to talk about the opportunity that Utah will have once we reach the Pac-12 tourney down in Vegas with all of you in one moment. But first, want to talk to you about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes today, in our friends at Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is the perfect vehicle for city drivers and great escapes. Their Class Executive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting to your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and the Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. And there's also the 2024 Nissan Armada. It will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Too bigger and explore further with the 2024 Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Also want to talk to you all about another sponsor of our episode of Locked On Utes. It's our great friends at UCCU. Here's some exciting news. UCCU has just elevated their checking accounts by enhancing them with more benefits, more savings, and more online protections than ever before. A lot more. Paired with the most advanced and comprehensive mobile banking tools, Elevated Checking is a must-have financial product packed with lifestyle security and financial benefits. The lifestyle benefits alone include cell phone protection, roadside assistance, telehealth, and 24/7 access to licensed health professionals with zero copay and exclusive savings on travel, shopping, and dining. And Elevated Checking is free when you do any one of the following. Use your debit or credit card 15 times or more a month, or make a monthly direct deposit of $500 or more to maintain an average daily balance of $1,500. Otherwise, UCCU Elevated Checking is only $6 a month. Visit uccu.com to open an Elevated Checking account online. Or stop by any branch to open an account. UCCU. Love where you bank. Dad, we just talked about the importance of the regular season, but then as you look to the Pac-12 tournament, I think we've seen so many teams save their season, right? Utah does not need to go and win the Pac-12 tournament. It'd be very tough for them to beat Arizona, although they almost did it, and that would have been something else if they were able to do it at home against Arizona, win that wild multiple overtime game that we witnessed the Utes have. But the NCAA tournament, in order to make that, you still need to have success if you're a team like Utah that is on the bubble in the Pac-12 tournament. And also, something that Utah hasn't done with Craig Smith, they're 0-2 so far in the Pac-12 tournament under Coach Smith, and feels like they need to do at least a couple things if they want to solidify themselves as not just a team that's going to be, will they get in, won't they get in, but they have an opportunity to really punch their ticket potentially with a strong showing in the Pac-12 tournament.
Yeah, I agree. I really like what Coach Smith has been doing. I think he's a great coach. I think he's handled the adversity of the injuries this season really well. And that's not something you don't plan for as a coach, but that's where your experience as a head coach, you know how to handle those things. And that's what Craig's done an excellent job of. As you look towards the conference tournament, again, it's all about matchups, right? So, as I look at the bracket here, I've pulled up in front of me, those top 4 teams get a bye, right? And so, Utah doesn't look like they have going to make it into that top 4. So then it's all about matchups, okay, so that means they're going to be somewhere in that probably 5 through 7 range. And, so then you're looking at beating, the 10, 11, 12 seed, which should be a victory. Utah should be playing with a sense of urgency down there, like we're playing for our tourney lives. That's what I saw tonight from their team. That was a sense of urgency they played with. If they can do that the next 3 games and then go to the tournament down in Vegas with that sense of urgency, they can win that first game. And then it's about who they would play in that second game, either the 2, 3, or 4 seed. When you look at, I don't have the standings up in front of me, JT, you might, but who those 2, 3, and 4 seeds might be, then it's like, okay, who does Utah match up against the best there? And that's kind of where you want to be. Because if you can win 2 games and get to the semifinals, then you're feeling pretty good about, the resume you've put together. If you stumble in and then you're losing to that 10, 11, 12 seed first game, that's not a good showing. That could come back to haunt you. So like I said, I like the position they're in. It's going to be about the matchups, whether they play a Washington State or an Oregon or whoever's going to be in that 2, 3, 4 slot there. That'll really tell the tale for how they end the season.
It will. And, you mentioned kind of the teams at the bottom, they might match up with the 10, 11, 12, Stanford, USC, and Oregon State. Stanford, we already saw them. Yes, they got Utah got them tonight, but Stanford got them earlier this season. USC is an extremely talented team, so we know the things the Trojans are still capable of too. And of course, just beat Utah recently also. That one on the road, and Utah did take care of business against the Trojans already once earlier this season, but still something that's going to be interesting to monitor for these teams. And, you've talked about what Coach Smith has done this year for Utah's team. I do remember last year just, seeing Utah in the bubble conversation, just in the tournament conversation back a year ago prior. And of course, they fell out of that, didn't have the kind of season, really struggled to navigate injuries. So outside of just their ability to navigate injuries, what do you think the difference is for this Utah team that has them looking like one of the many tournament teams you've kept your eye on for the past couple of years now? What has allowed Utah to be in this position late this season to you?
Yeah, I mean, I told Mark Harlan early in the year, I said, when I watched them play, I said, you look like a tournament team. Physically, Utah's big, they're strong. Kaba has gotten so much better. Physically, he's able to do it. Obviously, Carlson is a difference maker. And to be in the tournament, to make a tournament, you got to have somebody like that. And I think the guard play has been good. Obviously the injuries have changed up the lineup some. But like I said, their depth has shown through. And, to win in the NCAA tournament, you have to be able to win different ways. You got to be able to play small ball and throw it inside. You got to be able to shoot the three, and you have to be able to defend. And so when Utah's been able to do that against good teams, they've come out on top more often than not. And so to me, that's why they're built like a tournament team. They just got to take care of business here over the next week and a half and then see how it plays out. So like I said, I've been very impressed with Coach Smith, how he's handled this season. I know there's been ups and downs and some losses that have been very disappointing, but they're on a trajectory upwards right now as we enter March, right? And so that's just really important because everybody wants momentum heading to the conference tournament. And it's just so important that you have that opportunity to win some games and enter March on a hot streak.
You want to be hot and have the momentum late in the year. But you said every game matters. That's something that's big and important, which is why one of the final things I do want to talk about specifically with the men's basketball team is just when it comes down to those bubble teams. Obviously, you guys spend a lot of time on this all season long, but you know who's going to be in a large portion of them. So I can imagine when you guys do meet and deliberate over all these teams, you spend a ton of time on the bubble teams. So can you just talk a little bit more about all the things you kind of use to compare specifically those bubble teams as you dive into them and look over what could end up deciding Utah's fate or not?
So it's kind of fun. We get there we get there Tuesday night of selection week. So we spend Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday talking and putting teams in the field, voting. It's all anonymous voting. So I don't know the way the other 11 people vote. But we discuss every team from top to bottom. What's their roster look like? Who's healthy? What happened this game? I saw them play against this team. Here's what they did. I saw them play against this team, that type of stuff. And then you're voting teams in the tournament. On Saturday is the longest day for the basketball committee. Last year, we spent 14 hours, almost 15 hours in the committee room. And almost at midnight on Saturday night is when we were kind of putting the final teams in the bracket with contingencies for the teams championships that fall on Sunday. There's 5 tournaments that fall on Sunday. So Saturday night, for those of you listening, Saturday night, when it comes to about 8, 9, 10 o'clock Mountain Time, you can think of us in Indy. That's when we are really down to the brass tacks of, like last year, for example, we had 5 teams on the board for the last 2 spots. And we spent almost 3 hours determining which of those 2 was getting in the tournament. And so when you get down to that level, those again, those are the teams that are going to the first 4 in Dayton, or they're the first 4 out of the tournament. And you realize the pressure on you to absolutely do college basketball the right way, right? I mean, you're deciding the fate of these players, their seasons. And there's a tremendous amount of discussion, tremendous amount of analysis on every single game. And quite frankly, when you get to that level, every team has warts. I mean, there's the people with great resumes, they're already in the field. So you're down to splitting hairs, talking about teams. And like I said, that's when, you start to look at, okay, again, who did you play? Where did you play them? And did you win? And so that's where, like I said, that's where that out of conference schedule is really important. Did you have bad losses? And we can look past a bad loss or two, but you can't have 6 bad losses, right? How did you do against the tournament teams? If we look at a Utah and we say, hey, you know what? They had, let's say 12 games. I don't know the exact number, 12 games against tournament teams that are already in the field. We know who's already in the field by then. And we're going to take a look at that, how'd they do, and then compare them against these other 3, 4, 5 teams, right? We're going to see if there's head-to-head matchups. Obviously that's why that BYU win is very important for Utah's resume, because BYU is beating a bunch of Big 12 teams, and some of them could be on the bubble too. So if a team from the Big 12 lost twice to BYU home and home, and Utah beat them once, that's a meaningful point, right? So that's why those games are so important. That's why Utah, I know it's hard for Utah fans. You should be cheering for BYU to win every game, because it only helps your resume. Just like you should be cheering for St. Mary's and cheering for Eastern Washington.
Forced.
Because every win that those teams get helps your resume. And so that's a big deal, because at the time we're talking about Saturday night, we are splitting hairs by the narrowest margin to decide, yep, I'm voting for that team in, but I'm not voting for that team. And that's what happens Saturday night. And it's, like I said, it's a great night. It's exciting. It's crazy. It's stressful. But like I said, that's why there's 12 of us in there, to make sure we're doing the right job for college basketball.
And Utah is this year one of those teams that you have to split hairs about. It's going to be close, whether they get in or not, depending on how a lot of things play out. But if the field were to expand beyond 68, that might not be the case. So I want to talk with you about that possibility in one moment, Dad. But first, I want to talk to all of you about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. You can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And when it comes to the NBA, there is so much happening around the association. Whether LeBron turning back time, you can look at the Golden State Warriors. Are they going to be able to make a run here shortly? Over in the Eastern Conference, the Knicks continue to keep it going. Will the Bucks rise up in the standings? All that and more available for you to bet on at FanDuel Sportsbook. Dad, there's been a lot of rumors and discussion about the NCAA tournament field expanding. That was something that would obviously benefit a team like Utah, especially as they could make the transition into the Big 12, where maybe it would be nicer if there was a little bit bigger of a group that Utah could then have an opportunity to wedge their way into, as their schedule is basketball-wise going to get a lot tougher this coming season. But I did want to ask you where you think kind of everything stands right now on the potential of the field expanding beyond 68 teams.
Well, it is a discussion that we're having as a committee. There's lots of factors that go into this. This is not an easy decision. The men's basketball tournament generates 97% of the NCAA's total revenue of $1 billion. So wow. Anything you change there could have dramatic impact on every bit of whatever the NCAA does, from Division III tennis to Division I, soccer, or volleyball, or baseball, you name it. So we take it very seriously about thinking about what's the best for the tournament. We have expanded before. It was 64 and now we've gone to 68. So it won't be done haphazardly. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and there's a lot of discussion with CBS, our television partner, with TNT, right? So nothing's going to happen quickly. But we're taking a lot of factors under consideration, and I can't predict where it's going to end up. But I can tell you that it's something we discuss every meeting. We'll keep discussing it, and whether or not it happens, I really don't have a clue what's going to happen. But But I think the message to people is we don't take it lightly. We know we have the greatest 3 weeks in sports, and we want to make sure to preserve that.
I think fans everywhere will be very excited to hear exactly that. And you mentioned can't predict the future. It's up in the air, but I want to have your help trying to predict the future a little bit, because we just spent the past 24 minutes talking about the Utah men's basketball team. And this is what you do with all the teams in NCAA men's basketball is you evaluate their resumes and look at how they could do in the tournament potentially. So that's why I'm curious to get your thoughts on the Utah women's basketball team. This is the Utah women's basketball team that they also picked up a nice win here today. They only have one game left in the regular season. They'll take on Washington here. They're 21-8 overall, have had some big bouts against some big teams, tons of quad one games for them. In fact, coming in tonight, Utah has 6 quadrant one wins, tied for the 8th most in Division I, but it also has 8 quadrant one losses. That's tied for the 19th most overall. As you look at this Utah women's basketball team, currently projected to be a 4th seed in ESPN's NCAA tournament field projections, how do you kind of evaluate them, and where do you see them falling in everything?
Yeah, so, unlike the men, the women are firmly in the field. They're going to be in the NCAA tournament. The biggest difference between the men's tournament and the women's tournament is the women's tournament does pods. So teams host the first round on their home court. If you're one of the top 4 seeds.
Utah got to last year.
Exactly. That is the most important thing for women's basketball. So the difference between a 4 and a 5 is the 4 gets to host, and a 5 seed has to play at the 4 seed's gym to advance. That's how big a difference that is. So that doesn't happen in men's basketball. So Utah's had a great run. They've got a great amount of wins. They should beat Washington, and they should make a run in the Pac-12 tournament. They have to at least, I think, win a couple more games to secure that top 4 seed, and that is the key. So if I'm on the coaching staff there at Utah, that's my biggest concern is I got to figure out how to host those games in the Huntsman Center. I'll worry about playing the number one seed when I get to the regionals. But I feel really good if I got 2 games at home, the first 2 games of the NCAA tournament. So the important thing is they got a lot to play for, and that's great. They can't rest. They can't take the game off against Washington. They got to win a couple games in the in the Pac-12 tournament to make sure they feel good about that top 4 seed. But that is where their focus is, and I feel good about where they're going.
I feel good about it too, and it's going to be interesting to see how both things play out for the men's and women's basketball teams. And Dad, I appreciate you joining me. And before you get out of here, you do have that beautiful Big Sky banner up in the background. Big Sky commissioner, of course, that you are. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your conference tournament coming up?
Yeah, we'll be in Boise for the 5th year, and we're looking forward to it. We start our tournament a week from Saturday. We have our championship game on Wednesday night of selection week. And all 10 teams come to Boise, and very fortunate. It's a great home for us. As you know, we're the only one that doesn't have our tournament in Vegas. But Boise's been a great place for us, great arena downtown. All the teams are there, all the men's, all the women's teams. And it's going to be an exciting tournament. It's wide open. We're a one-bid league, one men's team, one women's team, fighting tooth and nail to cut the nets down on that Wednesday. So looking forward to getting back to Boise, and it's going to be an exciting Big Sky tournament.
You can catch all the action on ESPN Plus with Salt Lake City play-by-play voice Tony Parks doing the play-by-play duties. Former Utah coach Joe Craven's also joining in as well. Dad, I appreciate you so much for joining us. You and I kind of got my first start doing these kind of little podcast video type of things when you and I used to host a little show called From the Couch. So always appreciate everything you've done for me and greatly appreciate you coming on today.
Well, keep up the great work, buddy. Love chatting with you, and go Utes.
Go Utes. Love you as well. Thanks for joining us. That is going to do it for today's Locked On Utes, but we'll be back with you next week talking all things Utah athletics. We look forward to seeing you then.